Good evening. My name is Ellen Bolin. I'm the Senior Advisor to the Secretary of Historic and Natural Resources, and I'm here to chat with you all tonight about coastal flooding, which I'm hoping is also why you all are here tonight. So we're going to go through a few things, introductions. We're going to talk some about coastal resilience. This is a term we're using a lot these days, and this is all part of a broader effort for the state's Coastal Master Resilience Plan, which is a statewide effort to address the broader issues of coastal storm surge, coastal flooding, rainfall, et cetera. So we're going to get into that. The bulk of the conversation, or what I hope is the bulk of the conversation, is not me talking to you, but is you all telling us what are your concerns in your communities here around flooding. So what we're really trying to understand for communities is how is flooding affecting your day-to-day lives? As I go through the presentation, I'd like for you all to think about, does it affect your ability to get to work? Does it affect your ability to get to Norfolk? Does it affect your ability to get up 13? How or if it impacts your life? And then we're going to talk about some next steps, being prepared, a little bit of what the state is doing, et cetera. All right. So what is coastal resilience? I'm going to pause for a minute, actually, and let you all read that definition. The thing I wanted to focus on here, this is going to be the frame for tonight's conversation, is anticipate, prepare for, and respond to. Those are the three major points of coastal resilience we're going to talk about today. How do we anticipate it? So what is it going to look like in the next 40 years? What do we think it's going to look like for communities on the shore? How do we prepare for it? And how do we respond to it? Not so much how we recover. That's a broader effort, usually done by Virginia Department of Emergency Management, although that is an ongoing conversation. So the other term we use a lot is coastal flood hazards. And so what exactly does that mean? So there's three kinds of coastal flood hazards. The first is tidal flooding. This is your typical sunny day flooding. We see it a lot in Norfolk. It's really more nuisance flooding. So this is maybe affect your ability to get to work, but it's typically not catastrophic, typically. Storm surge flooding. Imagine this is pretty familiar over here. Big storm comes ashore, it's pushing more water on, particularly problematic when there's high tide. Rainfall flooding. This is the storms you see where you have a lot of water all at once and nowhere for the water to really be absorbed or the ground's really wet. So this is flash floods, this is catastrophic flooding. This is what happened in Tennessee in August. This is what happened like about a week ago, I think a week ago in Alabama. So this can be and is being pretty catastrophic to communities when it comes through. So what's the challenge and why are we here talking to you all tonight? Virginia's a coastal state. We have a lot of ocean and bayfront. We have 6 million people and 70% of those live in coastal areas that are at risk of flooding. It's a huge part of the population. These floods are expensive. They're expensive to the communities. In just 2 years, we had a couple major floods, and these weren't even huge storms, right? We haven't had a, knock on much wood, we haven't had a big category, 3 or 4 come through in years. But we still had $1.6 billion worth of damage from storms, not even big hurricanes. We also have the highest rate of sea level rise on the East Coast. So water is coming up our coast faster, which is further endangering billions of dollars in private property, community infrastructure. Virginia has a significant number of national assets, the world's largest naval base, et cetera. So it's a problem for Virginia's coastal communities and one we're trying to address. So what's driving this? So I mentioned rising seas. So sea level is rising, which means that low tides are higher, high tides are higher, more water is just coming in closer to people. This is also causing the land to sink. So as you lose more land, the water has further to run, you get more water inland. Changing weather patterns and severe storms. So this summer's been interesting for a lot of communities. We are seeing more severe storms and we're seeing them more often. So we are dealing with a lot more rain, a lot more often, and that's changing. So sometimes we're seeing it later in the year, we're seeing it times we may not be expecting it. So just changing weather patterns. And then, oh, this should be corrected. This is not necessarily construction. This is more development. So not a bad thing. just understanding how it can impact our communities. Because when we have development, often we have hardened surfaces or impervious surfaces, so the rain has no place to go, which is when you can get some flash flooding. You also just have more people in the way of the water. So those are the things that are driving the increased flooding all around here, but particularly in Virginia. So what's the challenge here? So this is Cape Charles. The red dot is the "you are here" portion. This is just, and these are sea level rise viewers. These are slightly different maps than we've had. So this is talking about some of the predicted sea level rise from 2020, last year, to 2060, so about 40 years. And so you can see where the water is coming into Cape Charles. You know, where we are now in 2020, it's not that close, right? We're multiple blocks off. In 2060, much, much closer. So the point of this map, and really any map you're going to see that talks about coastal flooding in Virginia, whether it talks about buildings that are threatened, roads that are threatened, and this is one of the takeaways, is what we are going to see in the next 40 years is we're going to have more people impacted by more water and impacted more often, right? Because it's going to come into more communities. We're going to have it more often. We're going to have more storms. So it's more people, more water, more often. And this is chronic flooding. This is about a 20% chance, annual chance of flood, something that happens about every 5 years. So this is not, these aren't your big storms, right? This is a storm that comes through, decent amount of flooding. So this is what a moderate to a major coastal storm looks like. This is what we call a 100-year event or a 1% chance flood. So why that's kind of a weird term to use, and I don't really think it captures things, is because oftentimes in the news, we'll hear the phrase, there's been 200-year storms in the past 5 years. And what that's trying to describe is just typically we don't expect storms of this magnitude to come through this often, and we are seeing more of those come through, right? More people, more water, more often. So this has about a 26, so this storm surge that comes in, again, the red is the "you are here" arrow. This is roughly a storm that's going to occur about every 100 years. So a pretty good storm that's going to come through. And this is just what NOAA is showing you in terms of sea level rise and what some of the moderate to major coastal storm could come through. So these are the numbers around that. So this is sort of the setup, right? So we've talked about what coastal resilience is, right? We need to anticipate for it. We need to prepare for it, respond to. We've talked about the fact that there's going to be more people impacted by more water more often. And in this particular area for Cape Charles, this is what's going to look like. You're going to have more water. So the big point of this conversation that we're trying to glean is, what does this really look like for your communities around flooding? We've done a bunch of these meetings now and started these in August, I think, Delcino, August, trying to understand what flooding looks like. And what we've heard a lot is, you know, my storm drain floods, my storm drain's blocked, we need a bigger culvert. And those are important things to know. Those are also things that can be addressed by local government. So we have special funds for those, stormwater assistance funds, SLAF. What we're really trying to understand is some of the bigger picture of flooding in your communities. So this is what I'd like to talk about right now. So what causes floods here? What does flooding look like? Open forum. Stormwater. So it's primarily from rain is when flooding is a bigger issue. Okay. Do you guys have high tide flooding? Nuisance flooding? Okay, right.
I mean, this week we had at the intersection today, we had no working up
Okay.
it was coming up,
High tide prevent the storm drain from
Right.
working properly.
Yep.
Really high tide, a lot of rain, you got a problem.
Mm-hmm. And that's going to be an ongoing challenge as sea level rises, right? We have more water that's coming up and no place for the water to run to. It's definitely going to be a problem. What's most at risk of flooding in your community? Is it homes? Is it businesses? Shoreside? What are your concerns about this on flooding? Or what brought you here tonight on a lovely Wednesday?
we're using the mic because we want people to see.
Yes, thank you. And I forgot that we do have people on Zoom, so I will probably repeat some answers and some questions. Okay, or you can, awesome, thanks, Riley. So what's at risk in this community? What are your concerns? Okay, yeah, I mean, Are you concerned of losing your house from, like hurricane related flooding, like rainfall? Like is it primarily hurricanes that drives the concern? I heard someone's voice. Northeasters. Okay. Okay. So for people on Zoom, and we'll try to get better about the mic, the concern is more nor'easters than hurricanes. So coming through more in the winter. I heard someone over here, I think, sir.
Well, just, it seems though when the storm comes up the bay,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to offshore, that's when the water really gets pushed up here. So I think our biggest risk is when a moderate or major hurricane probably, or a northeaster would come up the bay. That's when we would have a problem.
Okay. Coming up from the south versus perpendicular hit. Okay. Have any of your homes ever been affected by flooding in these communities? I'm seeing not. Can I see a show of hands? Got 1, 2. Okay. All right. Yeah.
As we move forward, going to see more erosion of the beach and some of the infrastructure. It gets inundated with major storms, and so obviously as we move forward, we look at that map. That's going to be more of an issue than that. Economic driver.
Mhm. Okay. Other thoughts? We'll move on. Oh, yeah. Okay, we've got some people on Zoom. Calvin's going to read some questions.
All right, so we have Sarah Morgan who says, my house flooded in Hurricane Isabel, as did several in Oyster.
Okay. Yeah, from what I understand, Isabel wasn't here at the time, was quite the storm, but not I believe a hurricane when she hit. It was just a bunch. It was not just, it was rain. Like that was the rainfall. It wasn't the wind. It was the water. That was the biggest problem with Isabel. And there's communities, at least that I know of in Hampton, that were without power and water for weeks, so for 10 days. And I don't know how it was, if any of you all were here when Isabel hit, if it was a similar impact to the shore communities. So we got Catherine's got it.
All right, so we have Joe Pfizer, if I'm saying his name correctly, apologize. Damage to historic homes in future coastal storms or loss of historic districts in a catastrophic one. So I guess he's saying they've had damage to historic homes in future coastal storms. It causes a loss to the historic district.
Okay, so impact historical resources. We've also heard that in other places. Yes.
And I remember with Hurricane Sandy, which did come up today. It's everywhere. There's an apartment complex at the north end of the beach where one corner of that building was hanging over the water. So, so there was significant erosion at that end and significant, damage to some structures. So yeah,
Okay.
and that wasn't even a very serious storm. It was more furthermore.
Okay.
Still involved damage.
Great, thank you.
Here we are, I guess we call it bedroom community waterfront. And all the property along the waterfront is private. The people doing what they can to maintain the shoreline, small community, shared beach or whatever. But we're seeing over time that the effects of the coastal flooding is coming in. And our concern is that, the people that are privately taking care of the beachfront, really protecting the whole community. Because when they go, there's another line of defense, the next line of houses, and so forth and so on. So we have those concerns for short-term concerns, long-term. It's mostly stuff and more research.
Other questions, other thoughts? Yes.
We have found that in dealing with flooding situations in Cape Charles, especially the drainage out Bay Avenue, that bureaucratic delays, just getting the machinery to work together so that EDOT works with these guys, work with that guys, cause unnecessary damage, years worth of flooding when it could have been solved very quickly. And indeed, we ended up solving it ourselves by building it ourselves, but bureaucratic delays are a really, really big deal when it comes to mitigating.
Okay. So trying to get local and state government to work together a little better, or mainly state agencies better and faster. Okay. Okay. So these are some of the other questions we're trying to glean from communities in terms of for flooding. Is it impacting, have you had to change your route to work? Has it impacted your ability to get in and out of your neighborhood? Access to healthcare, different things like that. Does it, is this something that you guys are encountering in your communities, affecting your daily lives of being able to access the resources that you need?
Depending on the storm, will affect coming in the Charles for a second.
Okay.
You can have water on the road, where the tradition that we can use sun or now. You can do that. That's just basically where I just still through.
Okay. Is it 5 inches, 6 inches, 2 feet of water? What's on the road in front of the brewery? Do you know? That
I guess 3 to 5 inches, something like that. maybe
Okay.
6 inches, It's not a common occurrence, but it's not unusual. If that makes any sense.
that does make sense. And we want to understand where the communities have points of egress when they need to evacuate.
We have one other road also. In the middle, I haven't been in that one. Because I don't know that one. What cemetery road or whatever.
Okay. How does it affect your power, your internet, your ability to get information? What happens when storms are coming through? Yes.
Let me actually ask a clarifying question to start.
Of course.
Sorry that I arrived late.
That's
Are you
okay.
asking about Cape Charles specifically or throughout our community, throughout the Eastern Shore?
Throughout the Eastern Shore is great.
Okay.
Yes.
Cool. Can
So yeah, I mean, we will. So yes. So just for perspective, and so these are the maps we're talking about. This is what we've done for a lot of communities to sort of show where we are, but we're really interested in coastal flooding around like Virginia. But this is the meeting for the shore.
Great. Okay, so on the seaside, on the other side.
Yep.
So I work in Oyster and I live in Willis Wharf.
Okay.
In Willis Wharf, all the aquaculture companies are on the waterfront.
Yes.
And the whole waterfront road floods in tides like the ones we've been having. So they have to move all of their equipment and all their employees have to park on the street upland
Mhm.
and then walk or, caravan in some way down to get to the facilities in order to get to work and to continue their operations.
Okay.
One of the other effects that we see is a lot of the boat ramps, when the tides get as high as they have been, whether it's the seasonal tides or these storm surge tides, the boat ramps actually get flooded enough that they're hard to use.
Mhm.
And so that affects those of us who do things like research, but also watermen that launch every day because there aren't that many harbors on the seaside.
Mhm.
It affects their ability to get in and out of those boat launches.
Okay.
So that's definitely two of the challenges we see there. And then you had just asked about other utilities and septic systems is the
Okay.
big one. And that's not necessarily flooding coming in over the surface or from the edges. That's a lot of the sort of ground, the water table pushing up.
Okay.
And there's some places where you can see where people have upgraded their septics because of that problem, but then there's a lot of people just sort of figuring out how to, like you flush your toilet less in the winter than you do in the summer. You just try to space it out. You don't use your dishwasher in the winter because, things start to gurgle and everybody sort of has figured those things out. So that's certainly a challenge. And that the places where it's coming up with the water table is one of the challenges because that's the hardest to get information about.
Okay.
You just sort of know because your yard's wet and your pipes gurgle.
Okay. Got it. That's helpful. That's really helpful. Other thoughts on this in terms of coastal flooding? That's helpful in terms of knowing about the shellfish businesses. Yes.
So we had kind of a unique situation earlier in the summer. I can't remember which storm it was, but I live up in Harborton on the Bayside. And